Hi, hello, hi. So today's topic is going to be a little heavier than usual. As many of you know, there's some stuff going on right now in the US with the Trump administration and transgender people. This is a big thing that's happening, and I just don't want anyone to feel discouraged or feel like we're losing somehow. I want to make this because I want people to have the facts, and also, you know, reading and breaking down that article is hard for people for a number of reasons. It was hard for myself because of developmental disabilities. I'm going to leave a link to that article in the description of this video. Feel free to read the original article if you'd like to. I'm here to kind of break down what it is saying, what it means, and also to explain the t-shirt campaign that I have going on right now. I'm raising money right now. 100% of the profits are going to go toward trans people. I will talk about that at the end of this video. I'll leave a timestamp like here, maybe. So what's going on? The Trump administration is trying to narrowly redefine the term sex to be an immutable condition based on the genitals you had at birth. So this information was gathered by the New York Times through a memo that they received, a memo that apparently has been circulating since the spring. And specifically what the memo says is that key government agencies needed to adopt an explicit and uniform definition of gender as determined on a biological basis that is clear, grounded in science, objective, and administrable. The direct quotes from the article from the Department of Health and Human Services is, "Sex means a person's status as male or female based on immutable biological traits identifiable by or before birth, and sex listed on a person's birth certificate as originally issued shall constitute definitive proof of a person's sex unless rebutted by reliable genetic evidence." So this brings up a lot of questions, the first of which being, does this mean that the government is now allowed to submit trans people to genetic testing? If so, how or when or why? Like, how will this be enforced? Is this going to be enforced? The next question that this brought up is, will this prevent trans people from changing their gender markers on their ID? And if so, will this retroactively stop trans people from having the gender marker on their ID that corresponds to the gender that they identify with? Will they be able to go back and be like, no, you were assigned female at birth, we're going to change your gender marker to female now? Like, is that something that could potentially happen? The last questions were more just about, like, how will this affect kids in schools? How will this affect trans people in prisons? How will this affect trans people in hospitals? So I couldn't find a whole bunch of information, but I did find this one part, and this is again from the New York Times article because I couldn't find much other information. And it says, the new definition would essentially eradicate federal recognition of the estimated 1.4 million Americans who have opted to recognize themselves, surgically or otherwise, as a gender other than the one they were born into. I didn't find anything to back that up, anything about like the implementation of this change. Like, I know that the memo that they were talking about earlier, they're talking about redefining the term sex under Title IX, which is the federal civil rights law that bans gender discrimination in education programs that receive government funding, apparently. So I understand that part. That's the most legal bit that I was able to find, but in terms of that one statement, I don't see what specifically backs that up. So like, if the new definition were applied, how would it eradicate federal recognition of trans Americans? Like, what do they mean by that? Do they literally mean that they're not going to let them change their gender markers, or they're going to retroactively change gender markers? I don't quite know yet. There wasn't any specification on that. I'm just telling you what was written. Regarding discrimination in schools and hospitals, apparently experts said that the policy would apply to issues of sex discrimination, so like students in schools using the bathroom that corresponds to the gender that they identify with, or the example they gave, a transgender woman who's refused a female room assignment at a hospital. This is according to Omar Gonzalez Pagan. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm really trying, I'm sorry. Who's a senior attorney with Lambda Legal. And also according to Mr. Gonzalez Pagan, he said that under proposed policy, such discrimination would not be protected in the view of the federal government, but apparently in practice, transgender people would still have legal protection because courts have ruled that they're covered under the umbrella of sex discrimination. So regardless of how they're defining sex, all people have a sex legally, so trans people would still be covered under that. It seems to me more like they're leaving us in a bit of a gray area. What he specifically said was that this is basically just going to make it a little more difficult. So it seems like when trans people in America do face discrimination, they're going to have a little more trouble standing up for themselves, and it's going to be a little more of a gray area as to whether or not what happened to them was discriminatory, whether or not it was infringing on their rights, which is messed up. It's absolutely horrifying. Anyway, that's basically all the information that was available. That's basically what the article says, and right now, as to what it all means, we don't exactly know yet. It's hard to say what'll happen or what effect this will have on trans people. This in itself is horrifying, and the fact that it's part of this bigger picture where Trump tries to stop trans people from joining their army and tries to redefine trans people out of existence legally. I think that it's all part of a bigger issue, which is that the Trump administration is clearly making attempts to slowly, bit by bit, strip trans people of their rights. It speaks volumes on what the American government thinks of trans people and how safe trans people are in the United States. So I know hearing all of this is devastating and it's scary and it's hard to not feel stripped of our power, but I promise you we are powerful. We have not been stripped of our power. There's a lot we could still do. Okay, and there's power in numbers, and we are numerous in this community. We are abundant. So what can you do? First things first, if you are American and you are of legal age, you can vote. Go vote, please, please. Register to vote. If you know how to register to vote, maybe ask among your friends, your social circle, ask if anyone else is unsure of how to register to vote. Help them register to vote. If you drive, offer to give other people lifts to go vote, especially if they have mobility limitations. Offer to accompany anxious people to go vote. I was very anxious the first time I went and vote because I didn't know what I was doing at all, and I really needed to go with someone, so I went with my mom, and it really made the whole experience a lot less scary for me. And the second time I went and go vote, well, my name hadn't been legally changed yet, and I was out as trans, and the whole thing was again very confusing and uncomfortable. So having someone there with me really helped me to gather the courage to just get it done. So offer to be that person, offer to accompany someone else that you know. Maybe ask your trans friends if they need someone to accompany them to go vote, especially if their name hasn't been changed yet. Next, you can call your representatives at federal, state, and local levels. So one Twitter user, I think her name is Louisa Smith, made a very good point when she said that given that this is essentially an administrative decision, there isn't much that Congress can do, but you should still contact your representatives. If anything, you can contact your governor and state reps and ask them what protections they can give trans people. Another Twitter user replied to this first person. Their username is @EveWing, and they provided a really great example of what you can ask when you call or what you can say when you call. So they wrote, in the wake of the recent Health and Human Services memo threatening to strip rights from trans people, what legislation will you introduce or support to protect them in insert your state here, whichever state you're in. So you could do that. I think that's a brilliant idea. You can also just in general, educate yourself and then educate others in turn. You're doing a great job by being here and learning about this. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this. And lastly, this is what I personally am doing. So like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this whole thing has sparked a whole movement within the community really, but I personally have decided to launch a new t-shirt campaign called You Can't Erase Us, and like I said, 100% of the profits are going back into the community. This is the shirt right here. I want to personally fund legal name and gender marker changes for trans people. I know that it doesn't fix the problem, I know that, and especially if this thing happening will be able to retroactively change people's gender markers, I get that that is still an issue, but in the meantime, firstly, nobody could change your name. Once you've changed it, like, you get to keep it. You get to keep your name change, and your name is powerful, okay? That on its own, I think it's empowering to have your chosen name on your ID. Secondly, even if all of this happens and they start to retroactively change people's gender markers, that will take time, and in the meantime, you will at least have this piece of ID that has your gender marker changed on it, and maybe they won't retroactively change people's gender markers, so maybe it would be a good idea to do it now before things get more complicated. I don't know. I just know that I want to make sure that people who want to do this have the money to do it, and I want to be able to give that to the community. I launched this campaign because I want to circulate this image, this message that we can't be erased and that we stand together strong. And I think that giving the money back to the community and empowering people and giving them the option to change their name and gender marker if they want to, giving them that power, I think also resonates with the whole meaning behind the campaign itself. So that's my goal. That's what I'm trying to do. Hopefully I'll be able to raise enough money to not only change people's names and gender markers, but also to contribute to other legal fees that trans people have, contribute to medical expenses, etc. So let's see how much this could raise. Hopefully I'll be able to help a lot lot of people. That's my goal. If you are interested in getting a shirt, the link will be in the bio. If you yourself would like to have your name change funded, your gender marker change funded, both, etc., you could go ahead and write me an email at youcan'terase us, all one word, @gmail.com. That email will also be in the description. You can just send me an email with your name and let me know what it is that you need to have changed legally and approximately how much it's going to cost, and I'm going to do my best to raise as much as I can to help as many of you as I can. And that's it. Again, the link for the article will be in the description. I will also leave a link for Trans Lifeline in the description and some resources I found in regards to legal advice and trans rights in the US and stuff like that. If you just want to get a little more educated on that stuff as well, ways in which you could be an activist, all that stuff, it'll all be in the description. That's it. Hopefully this video was informative. Hopefully it was at least somewhat empowering. Remember that we have not been erased. We have not been defeated, and we won't be defeated. We're going to get through this. That's it. I hope you're doing well and you're taking care of yourselves, and I hope you have a great day and a great week. All right, thanks so much for watching. Bye.